Hello, today I wanted to do a book review again on a book I read recently. It is Kathleen Hanna's Rebel Girl, and it's her autobiography. If you don't know who Kathleen Hanna is, she was a um, semi famous or famous punk singer. She was the lead singer of the band Bikini Kill, and then she went on to um, do the Julie Ruin project and La Tigre. And she also was the person who gave Kurt Cobain that phrase, smells like teen spirit, which became his famous, Nirvana's famous album title. So when I was growing up, I was really into punk in my teen years, and I loved Bikini Kill and then later La Tigre. I listened to them a lot, but at the same time, I didn't ever go to any of their shows, and I didn't follow her closely in terms of like reading interviews or looking at pictures or anything like that. But that whole rebel girl thing did influence me. Like I made my own zines. I made my own band shirts of her. I learned how to transfer a photo image. And so for the longest time, I still had this homemade Bikini Kill shirt. So I definitely was a fan. And I had gone on this library spree recently where I just started seeing what was available in my county library database, and I just kept requesting books, and then they all show up at my local library ready for me. So I was interested in reading her book, and she is a smart, funny person, and her writing reflects that. So it's a fast, kind of easy read. Um, Definitely a lot of content that is, sexual or mature or just not appropriate for a young teen, um, and maybe not even for a middle age teen or older teen. So yeah, when I noticed one of my children was looking through the book, I quickly took it and put it on my shelf. So I was really, though, I'm glad I read the book, for a few reasons. One is just her life is really interesting. She went through a lot of very hard things and very traumatic things. And that in itself was really eye-opening for me, because if you're not familiar with her music, it's very raw, very angry, but then also humorous, and it definitely has that punk fighting against something kind of energy to it. And that resonated with me on a lot of levels when I was a teenager or young adult. But reading the book was very eye-opening, because for me, I realized, oh, like in some of these things that she was singing about, I subconsciously assumed, oh, she's putting this out there, like almost being edgy on purpose or shocking or something, talking about the things she sang about. And reading the book, I realized, oh, she was just talking about her life. Like she was just talking about very close to her life, traumatic things that have happened in her life. There was a lot of, and things that other people were sharing with her, a lot of sexual assault that young women would come to her and talk about after her shows. And the song lyrics, like these are just things from her real life that she would decide to put into a song. So that was eye-opening, and it kind of made me step back and think, okay, like on one hand, I wasn't fully on the same page as her. Like on one hand, I related growing up, but then I did appreciate the fact that, oh, I had this very protected life in many ways, just in terms of, even just, I had a stable home. My family, I lived at home. I didn't have to worry about providing for myself and being exposed to things. One of the things she talks about in her book is how she did resort to stripping to make a living. And that seemed to be at odds with this whole feminist punk scene that she was in. But at the same time, she looked at it as this was a realistic way for her to provide for herself. Nobody else was taking care of her most of the time. And so she describes this emergency bag that she would carry with her everywhere she'd go, which would have her high heels and like a stripper outfit. And that's what she knew that she could always have with her in case she ever needed to make money. And she would. And so that theme of stripping comes up in some of her songs. And again, it didn't really sink into me that, oh, this is something she really has to do. And what I think was an interesting point in regards to the stripping is that it's neat how the book, she talks about her whole life from childhood to her time in Bikini Kill and with the whole, Kurt Cobain and Seattle scene and all that. And then moving on to her life as, past Bikini Kill and getting married, forming her other band. And, she really goes through her whole life and becoming a mother. And it was a really neat kind of, I don't know, like maybe it's heartwarming or something. She talks about how she eventually got a new emergency bag, and that was her hard drive that she would portable hard drive she would carry with her, because she knew that anywhere she went now, she, as a woman, older woman, she could give a talk and use her life story and share at colleges and things like that. And she knew she could get paid for that. So it was kind of neat to see how once she didn't need stripping anymore, she was very happy to move to some other skill. And that does provide some area for, compassion for some of these women who really are doing something like that because they have no other options. And once they get a better option, they will never find a reason to go back to stripping. So that was neat. And then going back to knowing more about her life and how that informed her music, maybe it was nostalgia or something, but when I was reading the book, I'd go back and look up I don't have her CDs or anything anymore. I do have a CD player, but I looked on Spotify and found some of the songs that Bikini Kill made or Latigra made. And when I listened to them, after reading about her story, like I started crying because, I definitely heard more of the pain and trauma that was informing those songs this second time around. So I'm not really, the music now isn't something I would listen to regularly. Some of the material's pretty obscene, and just, that I think that there's a place for hearing art that's expressing a lot of anger or trauma. But then at the same time, I don't think that's something that I would listen to daily at all or weekly like I used to as a young adult. I mean, her songs were part of the, soundtrack of my life. And then I think I had one more thought I wanted to make. Well, just overall that I think what drew me to her through her singing is that like she's got like a strong personality. And like I said, she's really smart and really funny. And, it did make me think somewhat about kind of like what you leave behind when you convert to being a Christian. Like when I became a Christian in my I was 20, I either quickly or, fairly quickly, left behind a lot of the things I used to do, some things that were very clearly sinful. And then I started going into other areas as time went on, like giving up music that had certain obscene themes or very angry themes, things like that. And there is a need, I think, to separate from that. If you really want to live for God and live a holy life, there is that separation. But then at the same time, it's not like you have to say, oh, everything is trash, or all those, that there wasn't any quality or value to those things. So that's like maybe a tension where I can still appreciate her to a degree, like her art and what she was expressing and how she did that really well. And but then also maybe, obviously still evaluate what is the right way to approach those things, so say things like sexual assault and um, some of those things that women do struggle with. um, I don't have a fully fledged out answer that I could express very quickly, but I feel like the way God would want us to deal with it would probably be different than the way she's advocating for. I guess maybe some way that would call both men and women to the way he wants us to relate to each other, how we could repent of whatever sins we're committing. And I think obviously if a man is committing sexual assault, that's such a weighty, ugly thing, he's definitely has the greater sin, but then what is the right picture? Like, how are men and women supposed to be relating, and also practicing things like chastity and monogamy and holiness and godliness, so I definitely have rejected this kind of rage as the answer, but it's very difficult. I hope that makes sense somewhat. So I guess on one hand, I'm saying I still do admire some of the things I admire, and appreciate her just as a person. Again, she's very funny, smart, um, she's insightful, but how to also go forward and think, well, what is the right godly way to deal with these things? It's probably not in the form of what Bikini Kill was doing, but altogether, it was really interesting to hear more about this person's life who had been such an influence on me. And it was funny, last thing, in the book, I saw this picture of her, because like I said, I didn't see a lot of pictures of her when I was really into the band. I just mostly listened. But I was like, oh, that's so funny, because like she was wearing the exact same outfit that basically I used to wear a lot, like these red pants and a white shirt with this rectangle of a band photo. It's like her own homemade band shirt. And I'm like, oh, how weird. Like, and with the dyed black hair, I had dyed black hair. And I thought, oh, how funny. Like, just that's kind of like me, but I was wearing a band shirt of her back then. So I don't know if I recommend the book or not. I just think, though, probably you've experienced too, when you do end up learning more about people who are not really like your hero, but definitely a strong influence and somebody who you maybe looked up to. It's really interesting getting to know more who they are. And then also at this point, I feel like, wow, she is kind of not too far away from me in age. Like, it's really interesting to think that she'd be someone who it would be fun to sit down with and talk to just as a woman. We probably would have things in common for sure. So that's my book review. And again, I'm not sure if you should read it or not, but I will say I appreciated her putting her story out there. And again, the book is Rebel Girl by Kathleen Hanna.